So with 2022 starting to wrap up, I start to look forward to the future. Some games I really am looking forward to playing in 2023. So the way I'm doing this is I'm trying to look at games that are technically slated for 2023, ones we know that like the developers have said are coming in 2023, because there's plenty of other games I'm looking forward to. Grand Theft Auto 6 or like whatever Silent Hill is doing, but we don't actually know when those are coming. So I'm trying to stick to like more realistic types of games. I got a couple of things you may not have heard of. I got a lot of stuff you have heard of, but a lot of stuff I haven't really gone on record about in a while. So I thought it was a good time to revisit and talk about some stuff as we get closer to their release. So for 2023, obviously, you can expect, like, I like to try as many games as possible. So I'm going to be hitting all the big guys, you know? Final Fantasy 16, I'm really looking forward to. I don't have too much to say about that. Then there's Harry Potter. There's also Diablo 4, which I expect to probably spend a good amount of time with, as long as they don't screw anything up. I like what we've seen so far. Then there's a big one from Nintendo, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And for that, I'm specifically really excited. And I've been excited since they started teasing it, because I've been deep in that whole rabbit hole thing of like, what they're doing with the story. Like, what is going on here? What is the deal with Link? What is really up with Hyrule? We've gotten some little bits and pieces here and there, but I'm really excited to see how it all kind of comes together. And knowing how Zelda can often tell stories where it's not necessarily like hitting you over the head, it's just kind of cool stuff. It's just how the game is presented. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes down. Not to mention just seeing how they evolve on the Breath of the Wild gameplay, because it's like a follow-up to that specifically. So it's not necessarily like a complete one-to-one new Zelda game. It's building off of what they built in the last game, and I really like that game. So I expect that they've spent a lot of time on this one, so I expect it to be very different, but still having that Breath of the Wild DNA makes me intrigued. Another big mainstream predictable one, though, is Starfield. Now, Starfield I am interested in playing for a very specific reason, and I've said this before, so stop me if you've heard this, but really, it's not too much about like the hype train or anything like that. I'm not like super hyped. It's more just curiosity, seeing Bethesda make a game that isn't Fallout or Skyrim. Like, it's literally just my brain going, what is that? Like, what is that like? And now we've gotten a little bit of glimpses here and there. We've gotten some gameplay and stuff, and I'm not necessarily like over the moon excited for it or anything, but still, even with the glimpses that we've seen, you know, I wasn't super into some of the first person shooting that we saw and stuff like that, but just what they built, I want to see how they did it, what it is. Now you might say like, oh, well, Jake, you're a reviewer, so there's not really too much risk jumping into it, right? But like, the curiosity for me is that big that I would have jumped in regardless of whether I was doing this. Just because like I probably, like a lot of you guys, like big fan of Bethesda games, but also a little bit burnt out on how they've specifically been building them for a pretty big chunk of time if you've been playing all of them. So what's gonna really truly stand out with this one? And the fact that they've said from the beginning, like this is just this totally new thing that they wanted to make, like they wanted to build their own universe, come up with stuff. That's what I want to see from it. It still, to me, like doesn't seem like this surefire guarantee though. I feel like it could go either way. I have faith in Bethesda. I know a lot of people don't anymore, but we'll have to wait and see. This next game that I'm really looking forward to this year is called Skate Story. I'm just going to put it on screen here. If you know me, if you know the types of games I like, you could see this and think like, yeah, that's a Jake game. This is a skateboarding game. So yes, I'm in, but it's also got like kind of a trippy, weird, also kind of demonic thing going on to it. There's a lot of different elements. There's a lot of sci-fi, supernatural stuff, but also just really cool high art visual style here. Some cool visual concepts that I really like, and it's being published by Devolver Digital. And I've been a fan of what they usually typically put out. It's a lot of creative stuff. Very often they have a good eye for that shit. And seeing this, just a weird, trippy, artsy, slightly demonic skateboarding game, it's just something I'm very much into. Like this Steam description, I remember wishlisting this, let me look it up. Skate fast to destroy demons and save other tortured souls on your journey from a fragile beginner to a hardened skater. Like, come on. It just seems good. Now, do I expect it to play as tight as something like Skate or Tony Hawk's Pro Skater? I don't know. I think that's like a very, very high bar, like a big demand to put on a game. But if it's engaging and cool and gives me some fun momentum and feeling of skating, Yes, please. Atomic Heart is another one I've been talking about forever with Game Ranks. We've been covering that forever, back when it was like this weird little thing. It was like a couple of cool experimental YouTube videos and then like a Kickstarter. They've been working on this game for a long time, and it's gotten more and more money, and it's been built up more and more, but I've been happy to see, at least from what we've seen so far and recently, that the creativity is still there. It didn't really lose what it was initially pitched as, this weird sci-fi alternate history Soviet kind of BioShock game with weird elements to it and some incredible art direction. And the newest trailers show that that's still what it is. Now, I think because it is from a smaller studio, like it may not be like the most fun and engaging, frenetic, fast shooter or first-person game, but if it's thought-provoking and kind of shocking or just creatively inspired, I'm just about that shit. I'm looking for that. I need that new taste, you know? I'm still looking for that new sound, and this looks like it could be it. I've been scrounging for a BioShock type thing for a while. Obviously, Ken Levine and his new team announced that new game, Judas. That's also going to be cool, but I don't know if we're actually going to see Judas in 2023, but hopefully now, after all this time, we finally have Atomic Heart. Let's go. And speaking of Europe, not to generalize, but the new S.T.A.L.K.E.R game is another one I've had my eye on for a long time. It's been delayed quite a few times. It's been pushed also because of everything going on with Ukraine. But it's still something that I'm hoping to see in 2023 because the S.T.A.L.K.E.R games were incredibly unique, and because they were so defining for like kind of like a subgenre on PC, I'm really curious to see what they do this time around. Not to mention the fact that I also am just a sucker for aesthetics and just like that type of vibe, the feeling that the S.T.A.L.K.E.R games evoked, the location, the culture backing it up is something that I've always just been into and genuinely curious about. So a new S.T.A.L.K.E.R game, I'm in for that. Then there's actually The Wolf Among Us 2 is slated for 2023. I've been waiting for this game for a long time, and it feels weird to kind of technically be excited for a Telltale game again. Now, things are different, of course. The game was in development, and then Telltale went dark, and now there's this new Telltale, which is like an entity, and then they're working with a studio called, I believe, Ad Hoc Studio, that is technically a studio founded by former Telltale members, so I'm hoping most of the DNA is still there, because I feel like fucking The Wolf Among Us was such a perfect thing. Like, it was a perfect storm. It was like they understood the source material so well. They did their own thing with it so well. It really, I think, was a good selling point for people to get into Fables, the line of comics. It is just extremely my shit, right? So I'm excited for Big B and people to return, but also where they go from here, what this means, because this is like a straight up regular Telltale game again. Can they bring back that former glory? Like, what would that mean? Would they make another Batman game or something like that? I'd like to see that too. But hey, let's just start with Wolf Among Us 2. Hopefully it's decent, because that first one, man, if you've never played it, it's really special. It is incredibly unique. It's probably unlike a lot of things you've seen before, and I definitely recommend it. Hey, now, before we keep going, I just wanted to say big thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video and for feeding me. Because Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. So as someone who plays a lot of video games for work, and it's just a busy work season overall for myself and for people in a lot of other industries, Factor has been a lifesaver. With the holidays, as usual, being really hectic, not having to worry about some meals has been really clutch for me. Factor meals show up fresh and they're nutritious, they taste good, and I can just heat them up in the microwave in minutes. This way, I'm not losing time grocery shopping or meal prepping or anything like that. It's just boom, I'm good to go, and I can spend more time eating and just focusing on what I do best. They offer keto, calorie smart, chef's choice, and vegan and veggie options, which include seafood, meat, and plant-based meals. So there's a lot of choices for ways to eat good, feel good, and not stress out about it. So if you want to check it out, it's worth a shot. Head to go.factor75.com/onjake60 and use code ONJAKE60 to get 60% off your first Factor box. That's a good hookup. Go eat. Click that link in the description down below, and thanks to Factor for sponsoring my videos. Next up, pretty early into 2023 is the Dead Space remake. That's like right around the corner. So for me, it was kind of like whatever. I've talked about how I don't think Dead Space necessarily needed a remake of the first game. That being said, it's shaping up to look pretty good. And I gotta say, after playing the Callisto Protocol, a game which I put out a video, I was very critical of the game. Didn't hate it though, but still, regardless of how I felt about it, it did leave me really itching and really hungry to go back and replay Dead Space. And knowing that now this new Dead Space remake is like right around the corner, I'm just gonna hold off and wait for that. But now I'm sitting here like, come on, oh, I need more of this shit. You know, it was like the Callisto Protocol was like a weird cousin. It was like a weird busted taste. I want the real cake, man. Like Callisto Protocol felt like a cool setup for like a bigger game. Like they could have made a cooler thing or like a sequel or something like that. But it also just reminded me why Dead Space is awesome. So I'm really hoping EA doesn't screw this one up. Another thing I'm looking forward to, I've mentioned it a little bit on this channel, but you may not have heard of it. It's called El Paso Elsewhere. If you see the gameplay on screen here from the trailers and stuff, this is another game that is 100% my shit. It's like an old school style shooter, very heavily inspired by Max Payne, the third person kind of shoot, dodge, bullet time type of thing, but also horror inspired and kind of like a low poly graphical style, like an old school game or like a new modern game, like a Dusk or something like that. So I'm in. It looks weird and trippy and supernatural, and usually I would have rather have just gone for like, you know, gritty noir crime shootouts and stuff like that. But the fact that they're doing their own thing with it and they're putting a Max Payne style shooter, but in this weird low poly horror thing, I think is incredibly creative and inspired. I love when games are just mashups of some of my favorite things and elements, so I am in very much. This is a very small developer. They've only put out a couple of games. I'm not really familiar with them, but I absolutely 100% have wishlisted El Paso Elsewhere, man. Also, got to talk about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. This is another one that is slated for 2023. It feels like forever. And at this point, it's still not necessarily the game I wanted Rocksteady to make. I think especially after the last Suicide Squad movie being really good. I'm also just kind of like, at this point, I'm like Suicide Squadded out in media. But we got one more. So whatever, I'm going for it. It seems like it's the game they truly wanted to make, and I have faith in Rocksteady. I like the way they do stuff. I like their interpretations most of the time of DC stuff. So I think there's a lot of potential here. The fact that they have been given carte blanche to use the Justice League, and you know, we just got the tease with Arkham versus Batman, which like I feel like is definitely going to be tricky in terms of a writing standpoint because of like the way the game ended, but technically like he's alive, so that's fine, but the Batsuit's different. Why are they doing that? I have a lot of questions, but my biggest question really, aside from the story and being excited to see like their version of Superman and stuff like that, is really how's it going to play? Like, what is this game? I know we've seen gameplay trailers kind of, and we've gotten snippets of it, but like, what the fuck is this game? I don't know. Like, it's just such a weird thing. Sorry if I'm being blunt or vulgar, but yeah, I have a lot of questions about this one. They're all like excited questions, of course, but at the end of the day, to me, it just shows really the goodwill I have for Rocksteady, like just how good their previous games can be. That the next one, I'm like, what is it? And then also, Suicide Squad, but I'm still like gonna be there day one. That's good on them for that. Then, of course, it's worth mentioning. Not too much to say about it at this point. The Resident Evil 4 remake, other than the more we've seen of it, the more I am 100% on board. I was very nervous with Resident Evil 4. I feel like it was lightning in a bottle. It was a perfect storm of like Japanese development influence that's incredibly unique, and just like some strange ideas that were also twisted with like a former version of the game that then they scrapped, and then they made this game, and it's just like this total shift point for Resident Evil. So it's a lot, right? And for them to remake that, I thought there is so much room to screw it up or miss the vibe, but they're leaning a little bit more into it being a little darker, a little bit more horror, and I'm down for a new, like, slightly different interpretation of it, and all the stuff we've seen so far seems really tight. I mean, you can parry the chainsaw, like, you could block the chainsaw with your knife or whatever. Like, what? That's crazy. I'm like, okay. But as a Resident Evil fan from day zero, basically, like, from the old days, it's been really fun to see them like rebuild things out. So like I'm excited to see if this game gives us a little bit better of an inclination of the jump from Resident Evil 2 Leon to Resident Evil 4 Leon. Of course, there's the bigger Resident Evil media, all the other like spin-off games and movie things and stuff that kind of gave us that, but I'd like to see the mainline games kind of tackle that and acknowledge that a little more. And you know, if they do that a little bit here, I'd be happy. But either way, I'm just excited to see some of those memorable moments again, but with a little bit of a different spin. And also, I'm already like afraid to replay that opening. That butthole clenching opening is always so perfect. And once more into the fire, I guess. But moving on, speaking of kind of like spooky, weird games, this game, The Last Case of Benedict Fox, is something I've been following. I think it was revealed at the Summer Games Fest, like E3 type of thing, with a really cool trailer. This is from a smaller development studio. From what I can see, they're behind Super Impossible Road from a couple of years ago, as well as Super Mega Zero from 2022. But this is kind of like a 2D kind of action adventure Metroidvania type thing. And it's got this whole kind of Lovecraftian vibe behind it that I am 100% about. I was immediately hooked by the look and animation of the main character. He kind of reminds me of like a Milo Thatch from Atlantis type of thing. You know, again, mixed with like some Lovecraftian elements. But it was really seeing a little bit of the gameplay and like the fighting the monsters and like just this spooky unknown that I am absolutely about. And I also have talked about this a lot before. I'm just a fan of like two-dimensional fun adventure games with some action and shit. Whether it's something more intense like a Dead Cells or a Metroid, like, but also the more story-based stuff like an Inside or Limbo or most recently Somerville, which I'm playing through, which isn't as good, but still like Little Nightmares type stuff, you know? And this seems like a good in-between because it's going to apparently have, according to the listing, Metroidvania elements, so yeah. Then there's Lies of P, which is apparently coming this year. I've talked about this on Game Ranks on the Friday news show a bit. This is a dark and gritty Pinocchio Soulsborne style game where you are Pinocchio going through streets, killing dudes in challenging combat. And I am very burnt out on hard games, like straight up. Like after this year, especially with Elden Ring, I'm like, all right, like I don't need every single game to be like a Soulsborne thing. But when I saw Lies of P, I was like, okay, one more, because this is really cool. Because if we're not getting a Bloodborne 2, which was a game I really loved for the aesthetic, you know, that style, that feeling, that tone. If we're getting a similar type of like Victorian creepy thing with like automaton, like marionette puppets and weird monsters, and I'm just so about that. A lot of times, I hate to say it, like I'm not as like intense, like sweaty dude about these games. I really come to them for, you know, the looks, the incredible art and design behind them, and Lies of P definitely looks like it's gonna have that, so I am keeping my eye on this shit. I mean, I have been since like the original concept came out, and now there's some gameplay out there, and like it seems like it's shaping up to be all right. So yeah. Also, like straight up, as I was working on this video, it seems like Sony announced that Insomniac's Spider-Man 2 is coming officially in fall 2023. They did it on the PlayStation blog, and I didn't expect that. I thought it was gonna release later. I was willing to wait as long as it took, but this is pretty obvious. I'm very excited about this one. How many times have I talked endlessly about the freaking Spider-Man games here? I'm really curious to see how much they're going to shake this one up, because just that little teaser trailer we got way back when, it implied a lot of big moves. I'm really curious to see how it's going to play, who you're really playing as, and of course, the villain stuff is very exciting. For me, at the end of the day, though, if they make a story as good as the one from Spider-Man PlayStation 4, I think they get Spider-Man, so I'm just down for that. If I can swing around and there's a good story, I'm easy, man. And last but certainly not least, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I publicly don't talk about Star Wars movies or things anymore. I've kind of stepped back from that on the internet. I needed to have like one thing I kept to myself that I just enjoyed with my friends. But the games, I can't help myself. As you guys probably know, I really, really loved Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. They nailed a lot of things, and I've been feeling very hopeful about Star Wars games more recently, like from that and Squadrons and a couple of like. So this, now that we've gotten a look at the Game Awards with that cool trailer, I am really excited for what they got going on here, man. Like from a story setup to seeing Coruscant to just expanded gameplay and more capability with Cal. Just kind of like a bigger, better sequel is all I really wanted from Survivor. So it seems like they're cooking that up. I have faith in Respawn. Like I really like Respawn. I like what they do. And I also just really liked how they handled Star Wars. Like it seems like they understood a lot of it, and where they added to it, it felt really thoughtful and not forced and just very like fully aware. It's hard to explain, but just something about like the way they did their own little things in the Star Wars world, you know, here and there, I really like. So if they're allowed to go harder and do more this time around, and especially at this point now, I think after the first game was a little bit of a riskier game, but for them, now that game kicked ass and sold well, I hope that like they were just given full reign to just do crazy shit for this one, and I'm excited. I'm also just excited to see what they do with Cal Kestis, who in the last game was a little bit of a blank slate. He had a story, he had an internal struggle that was interesting, but I'm curious to see how they can expand him now in this one. Ooh, I don't know. I'm just excited. I'm so excited for that. 2023 looks pretty good. There's a lot more that I haven't been able to mention because my brain can only remember so many things to be excited about, and I'm bad with dates, man. Like dates and years, it's hard for me. I have to write all of this down. So chances are there's probably something I did not have time to mention. So let me know what you're looking forward to in 2023. Do not write in my comments that there are no good games in 2023. Don't play that shit with me, man. Because if you come around here, you know what I do. I'm just talking about stuff I love. So let me know what you love, or let me know what you're looking forward to in 2023. I definitely want to hear that. Thank you, though, if you're coming around here and listening to me ramble and yap about stuff forever. I very much appreciate it. So clicking the like button helps me. But onward to 2023. This was a wild year for this channel. Thank you for buckling up with me. I'm looking forward to talking about more games and movies and weird shit in 2023. I'm Jake Baldino. Thanks for watching. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.